Authorities said a fire broke out after the attack but was extinguished. Up next, Bitcoin tops $40,000 for first time since May 2022 as momentum builds.
And a warm welcome to the Business Desk. Nigerians are facing a 133% increase in food insecurity over the past 3 years, despite government and international interventions. The number of people affected has risen from 63.8 million in 2014 to 2016 to 148.7 million between 2020 and 2022. The situation is exacerbated by factors such as insecurity, climate change, and poor funding. Agriculture analyst Intedo Ikot urged the government to address the issue urgently, as food inflation has also risen, causing a cost of living crisis. Now, Nigeria currently has 133 million multidimensional poor people, making up 63% of the population. The federal government plans to generate 298.4 billion naira in revenue from selling off certain government assets in 2024, aiming to finance public debt and reduce the fiscal burden. The 2024 budget proposal, titled Budget of Renewed Hope, aims to increase national revenue, reduce deficits, and increase capital expenditure. President Bola Tinubu presented the budget highlighting the need for macroeconomic stability, increased revenue, and a public-private partnership model to drive economic stability. The budget also includes provisions for big-ticket infrastructure projects. Still in business, the Nigerian Shippers Council (NSC) is ready to partner Lekki Deep Sea Port in Lagos to promote efficient cargo movement and port efficiency. The NSC Executive Secretary Pius Akuta assured the port management during a visit by Managing Director Duro Gang as he praised the NSC's regulatory activities and the port's value to the Nigerian economy since its commercial operations began in 2023. He called for continuity and the NSC's unwavering support to make Nigeria the maritime hub for West and Central Africa. Now, Bitcoin has broken above $40,000 for the first time since May 2022 as it rides a wave of momentum on broad enthusiasm about U.S. interest rate cuts, and as traders bet on the imminent approval of the U.S. stock market traded Bitcoin funds. The world's biggest cryptocurrency, it's as high as $41,748 on Monday, its highest since April 2022. Similarly, casting off the funk that has settled over crypto markets following the collapse of FTX and other crypto business failures last year. Also, gold hit a record high Monday as growing optimism by the Federal Reserve will cut U.S. interest rate in the new year has also dented the dollar in recent weeks. The previous metal, seen as having investment, reached an all-time pinnacle at $2,135.39 an ounce. Now, profit-taking later set in, leaving it to trade at $2,069.01. The dollar was also firmer on Monday as gold is benefiting also from the Israel-Hamas war, according to analysts. Elsewhere, Bitcoin traded over $40,000 for the first time since May last year, boosted by hopes that the United States would soon allow broader trading of the world's biggest cryptocurrency. Now, major stock markets mostly fell in Europe and Asia, while oil prices dropped. And as much can take on business, I am Emmanuel Olubobokun. The news continues shortly.
And now up next is entertainment news. Stay with us.
Akpala hip-hop artist Terry Alexander AJ, better known as Terry Akpala, has revealed why he declined to join Don Jazzy's Maven Records and Spaceship, Burna Boy's record label. The singer said his mother advised him to be the face of any label he signs to. Terry said despite opportunities with Don Jazzy and Burna Boy, he chose Nelson Jack, a record label where he could be the main artist. South African singer Tyler Laura Sithau, better known as Tyler, has revealed that she had a tough time convincing her parents to let her make music. She said her parents were against her decision to become a musician because they do not consider music a job. The Water singer said her parents eventually gave in after she cried for days. In a recent interview, Tyler revealed her parents initially saw music as a hobby, not a job. She mentioned that convincing them was challenging due to the rarity of music careers in South Africa, but she demonstrated her commitment. Hollywood actor Max Shepard has revealed that he suffered 6 heart strokes and had to be resuscitated multiple times. Shepard, 59, who shared a selfie of himself lying in a hospital bed, noted that he suffered from what is called a widowmaker heart attack. According to the Cleveland Clinic, this heart attack occurs from full blockage in the heart's biggest artery. Shepard expressed that his chances of survival were almost non-existent, adding that he felt great and humbled once more.
Shiloh is a mountain of taking delivery of our hanging inheritance. There are things about your life and my life that will never have an answer except at Shiloh.
I want to return the glory to God of this commission.
After Shiloh in December, I got pregnant for the first time in my marriage.
He has prepared a table of fat things for us at Shiloh. This Shiloh shall be your Shiloh in every sense of the word.
And in sports news, in a bid to continue promoting archery in Nigeria, over 20 archers and lovers of the sport gathered to celebrate the opening of the third private archery club in Nigeria, the Zen Archery Club, which was open to the general public over the weekend. According to Emmanuel Oyeleke, who was part of Team Nigeria that emerged victorious at the 13th African Archery Championships in Tunisia, the club is open to ensure that the sport of archery is taken to the grassroots level and Nigerians can have access to the sport.
The purpose of having this club transcends just the immediate. There's so many benefits. First thing, archery is a very regulated sport. So in order for you to do it, you have to have the necessary equipment and the necessary environment. And that is what we're providing here. We're providing the equipment, the environment, and we're making it accessible. We're making archery accessible to the common man. The development would foster the uptake and development of the game of archery in Nigeria, because what we're doing essentially is bringing it closer to the people, bringing archery closer, introducing people that have never come in contact with archery before. They've only watched it in movies, they've only seen it on TV. We're bringing them closer to the game and we're introducing them to the game, even the young ones, so that in 10 years, in 8 years, in 10 years, we can have young people that will grow up to represent us in the Olympics.
You see, purpose of having club is to enable the country to have more archers, because if you don't have club, you cannot have archers. It is from the club that we raise team. It is from there we raise more archers. You see, it's closer to the people. It's closer to the people. But federation, we don't know where is federation. No, we have our office in Abuja. So, but clubs are around people, more close to the people. So, from club, we raise archers.
The clubs give you an avenue to measure your skills against what I'll call advanced archers, the archers that are senior to you in the sport. So it helps you, check how far you've come, and also give you pointers to pretty much develop your own skill.
The purpose of
For more stories, please follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram, and do subscribe to our YouTube channel at Plus TV Africa and Plus TV Africa Lifestyle. You can also view us from Limex and Limex.tv and Glow TV apps anywhere in the world. I am Destiny Momo. Many thanks for watching.
After a bruising fight over its leadership, a new Congress takes over Capitol Hill. How will divided government impact America's direction? From immigration to defending Ukraine, now the inside story, new Congress, new challenges.
Hi, I'm Katherine Gibson, VOA's congressional correspondent here on Capitol Hill, where the new 118th Congress is trying to make its mark. Democrats managed to hold on to control of the U.S. Senate in November's elections, while Republicans took control of the House of Representatives, giving President Joe Biden a divided Congress to work with for the next 2 years. And the lengthy battle among House Republicans to choose their leader suggests any agreements with the White House will be few and far between.
So help you God.
Republican leader Kevin McCarthy emerged from a rare 4-day battle to become Speaker of the House.
The House will be in order.
Touting Republicans' accomplishments in their first full week of work.
Government should be here to help you, not to go after you. Be able to protect the unborn. We just protected the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, where the president can no longer deplete it and sell our oil to China. And we opened the House back up for the public.
But analysts say the conservative caucus that objected to McCarthy as Speaker will continue to be a problem.
He is in a weakened position, but his biggest problem is that his margin is so small. So he has only, a 5-seat margin.
Many Republicans object to resetting the nation's debt ceiling, a stance that could have global consequences if America's credit rating suffers as a result.
The American people elected Republicans to get our fiscal house in order, and get our fiscal house in order we will.
With inflation still high in the United States, Democrats have warned against government spending cuts.
These spending cuts harm families, communities throughout the U.S. that are already struggling with inflation and the cost of living.
Republicans have also launched multiple investigative committees.
Today, we will counter the Chinese Communist Party with our Select Committee on China. We will vote to protect every American's constitutional rights with the new Select Subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government.
And President Joe Biden and his family are expected to be a subject of Republican investigations, including concerning their financial transactions, despite Democrats' objections.
But instead of trying to find ways to work together, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle continue to lean into an extreme MAGA Republican agenda, which seems to be focused on trying to investigate the president's family, not make a difference in the lives of everyday Americans.
The Biden administration's immigration policy will also come under scrutiny.
If you look at the operational goals, securing the border, securing our cyber border.
as well as billions of dollars in U.S. aid to Ukraine.
The House Republicans are split also, but Speaker McCarthy has indicated he might side with the elements who want to push back on funding.
But any legislation passed in the House will have to be agreed to in the Democratic majority U.S. Senate. One flashpoint that may emerge soon is the cost of supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russia's attacks. The U.S. has spent tens of billions of dollars in military, economic, and humanitarian assistance for Ukraine since Russia invaded in February 2022. But several Republicans in Congress are questioning the amount of money being spent. VOA politics and policy reporter Veronica Balderas Iglesias explains.
As Ukraine mourns the victims of the Russian missile strike in the city of Dnipro, U.S. President Joe Biden and Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte decried Moscow's aggressions during a bilateral meeting in Washington.
Russia is just continuing to act in ways that are almost unbelievable. The brutality with which they're acting.
Rutte announced more support for Kyiv.
We have decided to spend another $2.5 billion on helping the Ukraine war effort. We have the intention to join what you are doing with Germany on the Patriot project, so the air defense system. I think that is important.
Also on Tuesday, circulating on Russian social networks, what looked like images of a makeshift memorial in Moscow for the Dnipro victims. At the government level, however, more promises of military might by Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu.
Strengthen the combat component of the Navy, the aerospace forces, and the strategic missile forces.
Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov left the door open, however, for high-level talks between Russian officials and the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, William J. Burns.
It could be excluded, of course. This dialogue is useful. I don't know the exact dates.
Near Romania, meanwhile, NATO expanded the surveillance of Russia's military activities with the deployment of 3 new planes. And on the ground in Ukraine, the International Atomic Energy Agency set a permanent presence to help safeguard key nuclear facilities. Veronica Balderas Iglesias, VOA News, Washington.
We arrived back here in Ukraine yesterday, and we're now in Lviv, in the western part of the country. Lviv is far from the war, but it is still the frequent site of attacks on infrastructure and is a main destination for internally displaced people and war wounded. This hospital specifically treats soldiers and civilians who have lost limbs, mostly from bombings and landmines, and there are hundreds of people on their waiting list. We're reporting today from Dnipro in Ukraine, and right behind me is a makeshift memorial for the more than 40 people that died in the bombing of this building on Saturday. Today we met some people who survived the bombing. One man told us that he only heard silence when the blast hit, and then he realized he was bleeding. He could then hear the screams of women and children and realized he had to go outside. Once he got outside, the situation was even more horrifying. He could see cars and his building on fire. Then, about 20 minutes after the initial blast, his building collapsed. Now he and about 300 other people are homeless. Reporting from Dnipro in Ukraine, this is Heather Murdoch, VOA News.
Republicans in the House of Representatives also have their sights set on investigating President Biden's immigration policy. Controlling the flow of migrants crossing into the U.S. from Mexico has been a challenge for decades and topped the agenda for Biden's meeting with the leaders of neighbors Mexico and Canada. VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell was in Mexico City for the summit.
Amistad, bonhomie, friendship. In all 3 languages, the leaders of Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. made a show of unity as they met Tuesday in Mexico City.
We're true partners, the 3 of us, working together with mutual respect and a genuine like for one another to advance a safer and more prosperous future for all of our people.
But the issues on the table are not as easy. Irregular migration, illegal drugs, climate change and trade disputes are front and center, as the Mexican president pointed out as he openly challenged Biden to expand economic cooperation.
This is the moment for us to determine, to do away with this abandonment, this disdain, and this forgetfulness for Latin America and the Caribbean, which is opposed to the policy of the good neighborhood of the titan of freedom and liberty, FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and starting with you.
Biden fired back.
The United States provides more foreign aid than every other country just about combined in the world, to not just the hemisphere, but around the world. Unfortunately, our responsibility just doesn't end in the Western Hemisphere. It's in Central Europe, it's in Asia, it's in the Middle East, it's in Africa, it's in Southwest Asia.
On Tuesday, the U.S. announced a range of outcomes, which included plans to collaborate on supply chain issues and semiconductor development, modest commitments to reduce methane emissions from the solid waste and wastewater sector, and more clean energy collaboration.
Put it simply, we are, and always will be, stronger together. The world today is facing a lot of uncertainty, with the rise in authoritarian leaders causing global instability and the high cost of living putting stress on families at home. It's important that we come together as leaders and as friends to look at ways to make our economies more resilient.
Irregular migration is also a thorny issue, especially after Biden launched his trip Sunday with his first presidential visit to the busiest port of entry in the U.S., in El Paso. The leaders also reiterated their commitment to safe, orderly, and humane migration through the expansion of legal migration pathways, a range of collaborative measures and better communication, both among one another and with the public. They also agreed that illegal trafficking in arms, drugs, and people is a shared threat, and committed to work together on the challenge. So, was this summit a success? Mexico watchers say that's a tough question.
Trilateral summits rarely yield major announcements or resolution of issues, and given that the issues that the three leaders talked about are complex and long-standing, I think it's not surprising that there was not some explosive announcement in their communique or in their press conference. But I think, having said that, the fact that they meet on a regular basis and that they identify priorities for their administrations to pursue for the coming year, I think that is important.
But as the leaders highlighted, this is a continent with great potential and great challenges. Will this summit move the needle? Time will tell. Anita Powell, VOA News, Mexico City.
More than 100 radio stations shut down last year in Venezuela under the weight of stiff government regulations and random threats of violence. Now, proposed laws to regulate social media adds to the pressure on journalists there. From Caracas, VOA's Alvaro Algara has our press freedom spotlight.
Media censorship has risen to new heights in Venezuela, with a record number of radio stations closed, even as the Venezuelan Journalists Association, CNP, documented marginally fewer physical attacks in the past 12 months.
There is a policy of censorship, prosecution of the media. Although it is true that physical aggression against journalists decreased, we saw an increase in radio station closures from 4 in 2021 to 104 in 2022.
The state communications regulator cited licensing breaches for many of the closures, and lawmakers in 2022 denied the action was related to the broadcaster's content. But Carlos Correa, director of the free expression nonprofit Espacio Público, says the moves appear to be part of a policy to limit independent media.
This year, we have documented the highest number of closures since 2001. This situation indicates that the government seems to be trying to reconfigure the ownership structure of these stations.
Adding to worries for journalists are new efforts by President Nicolás Maduro's government to reform media laws. The National Assembly is discussing proposals on regulating social media, including requiring platforms to have an in-country office to handle complaints.
We're going to regulate and control because in recent years, Venezuela has been a victim of psychological warfare through messages on social networks.
But reporters working in an already restrictive environment are wary of the plans. And Carlos Julio Rojas, an independent journalist and member of the National Press Workers Union, says pro-government supporters sometimes use social networks to generate smear campaigns against those in media.
We've seen how the Nicolás Maduro regime's dominance over communications continues to get stronger. What's their end goal? To close that last space that exists for freedom of expression?
If passed, the bill could add to Venezuela's already poor ranking on the Global Press Freedom Index, which measures the ability of journalists to work freely. The watchdog Reporters Without Borders says media there work in a restrictive environment with policies that threaten the full exercise of independent journalism. For Álvaro Algarra in Caracas, Venezuela, Veronica Villafañe, VOA News.
Threats of violence and government intimidation has many journalists fleeing Nicaragua, finding safety in neighboring Costa Rica. From its capital, San Jose, our Donaldo Hernandez shows us how a media nonprofit organization is helping those exiled journalists.
In search of protection, this group of Nicaraguan journalists arrived in Costa Rica halfway through 2022. Like many of their colleagues back home, they risked arrest or harassment by Daniel Ortega's government as it cracks down on the media and opposition voices. In the past 2 years, authorities have seized the headquarters of the historic La Prensa newspaper, prompting the entire staff to flee. Officials have also revoked the licenses of several television and radio stations. Helping the exiled journalist adjust is the Institute of Press and Freedom of Expression, or IPLEX, a Costa Rican nonprofit organization dedicated to protecting Central American journalists. Marco Barquero is project manager at IPLEX.
Our goal is to help them in their legalization process and to promote a more orderly migration for Nicaraguan journalists.
More than 150 journalists have been forced to leave Nicaragua in the past 4 years, according to the Independent Journalists and Communicators of Nicaragua collective. Marco Barquero is in close contact with many of those who recently arrived in Costa Rica.
Through all IPLEX programs, we have helped 62 Nicaraguan journalists and 1 Salvadoran journalist.
The nonprofit offers aid and temporary protection as journalists integrate into Costa Rican society. Raúl Sileski Jiménez is president of IPLEX.
The Home Refuge program covers airfare, transportation, insurance, food, shelter, internet, per diem for food and basic necessities to sustain them for a while.
For journalist Alberto Miranda, the support made a big difference. Miranda says he has been assaulted by police and threatened with arrest. He also received death threats. In 2021, he decided to leave for Costa Rica, but for the first 6 months, he could not find work.
I can tell you that this program represents an important support for Nicaraguan journalists when we arrive in Costa Rica, often in a situation of economic vulnerability.
Miranda now works for the news website Nicaragua Investiga. IPLEX wants journalists to continue their work. Media watchdog Reporters Without Borders says Nicaragua's media endure a nightmare of censorship, intimidation, and threats. But even from exile, the country's journalists work to keep news flowing. For Donaldo Hernandez in Costa Rica, Veronica Villafañe, VOA News.
For those who overcome the hurdles to enter the U.S. legally, settling into American life and finding a welcoming community can be a challenge unto itself. VOA's senior Washington correspondent Carolyn Persuti found one in an unlikely place, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Karthik Raghunath Palanimalai is a software consultant. After he arrived in the U.S. on an L1 tech visa, he says he got no help from Colorado Springs to get settled. Instead, he relied on the city's Indian American community.
They helped me to get to the apartments and, to the work nearest to the place, and then the grocery shops or whatever things So they really helped me for the first 3 months.
Jackie Jaramillo of Centro de la Familia says newcomers like Palanimalai are often invisible and isolated.
It's very difficult. There are a lot of institutional barriers and there are cultural barriers. There's definitely racism. A lot of the immigrants that we serve are victims of crime.
That's why some found it surprising when the George W. Bush Institute ranked the city 21st out of the top 100 metro areas in the U.S., where immigrants are thriving. Colorado Springs is best known for the U.S. Air Force Academy and for Pikes Peak at 4,300 meters. The city government is largely conservative, and most Republicans are outspoken about stopping illegal border crossings.
I don't think we have a sign up that says, Colorado Springs, great place for migrants.
John Suthers is a staunch Republican and two-term mayor of Colorado Springs. In 2022, the Milken Institute ranked the city 9th in economic performance among large U.S. cities, an enticement for highly skilled authorized immigrants.
Military defense is about 40% of our economy. There's an awful lot of jobs in the related high-tech, space, cybersecurity, and things like that. And those are areas where I think a lot of our people who are migrating legally have the expertise in, and so they're looking around, why wouldn't you come to Colorado Springs?
Colum Clark wrote the George W. Bush Institute's report, Immigrants and Opportunity in America's Cities. He says several factors were considered in the rankings list.
Is it a good place to do business, to start a company? Is it a good place to kind of get ahead career-wise? Is it a good place to afford a home?
To that, Palanimalai says yes. His new wife, who also landed a tech job, joined him in Colorado Springs, where they're enjoying the Rocky Mountain life, along with a little bit of home, like playing on the local cricket team. Carolyn Presutti, VOA News, Colorado Springs, Colorado.
Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, an outcry for the protection of human rights has echoed throughout the global community. In its annual report, Human Rights Watch highlights a crisis that extends beyond the war in Ukraine and exists in China, Afghanistan, and Africa. Details from our Henry Ridgewell in London.
The Human Rights Watch organization says that following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the global community deserves credit for unleashing what it calls the full arsenal of the human rights system, including an investigation by the International Criminal Court.
We saw immediate responses from the international community to mobilize around key human rights supports, including establishing international justice mechanisms, evidence gathering for war crimes.
In towns like Bucha and Izium, there is widespread evidence that occupying Russian soldiers tortured, raped and executed civilians. The United Nations Human Rights Council has documented several hundred civilian killings, thought to be a fraction of the total.
In some cases, Russian soldiers executed civilians in makeshift places of detention. Others were summarily executed on the spot, following security checks in their houses, yards, and doorways.
Human Rights Watch's annual report also highlights ongoing abuses in China, including the mass detention, torture, and forced labor of as many as 1 million Muslims in the Xinjiang region. Beijing denies the accusations. The report says the UN Human Rights Council's increased scrutiny of Beijing's actions is encouraging.
What we have seen for the first time in a very long time is cracks in the authoritarian armor.
In Iran, protests triggered by the death of Mahsa Amini after she was detained by morality police have grown into nationwide anti-government demonstrations. Human Rights Watch says the execution of at least 4 protesters must trigger a stronger global response.
We need to move beyond international solidarity for protesters and need to make sure that governments all over the world are holding Iranian officials to account.
The report cites increasing human rights abuses in Myanmar, where the authors say the regime is launching assaults on communities across the country that oppose the military coup. In Ethiopia, Human Rights Watch says the recent African Union-led peace process has resulted in a fragile truce.
Ensuring that there is accountability for the egregious crimes that took place in the Tigray region, for example, is going to be critical for this ceasefire and this truce to actually hold.
The report says climate change is having an increasing impact on basic rights worldwide. It says governments have a legal and moral obligation to regulate industries such as fossil fuel extraction that are incompatible with protecting basic rights. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
That's all we have for now. Stay up to date at voanews.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News. Follow me on Twitter at KGYP and catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service, VOA Plus. I'm Katherine Gypson. We'll see you next week for The Inside Story.
Who has the right of way? Nigerian roads come with a lot of chaos. The chaos is caused by a combination of drivers, motorcycle and tricycle riders, pedestrians, and sellers who all claim the right of way. The chain of right of way holders in Nigeria is hierarchical, and car and motor drivers are at the top of the chain with pedestrians at the bottom. Car or motor drivers believe that they always have the right of way regardless, and motorcycle and tricycle riders don't even have any regard for who has the right of way. For fear of accidents and their lives, pedestrians have learned to cower. When a collision occurs, the question of who has the right of way is on the lip of all concerned as they try to figure out who is guilty. The law doesn't grant anyone the right of way, but you yield it to other road users under these circumstances. At a yield sign, to pedestrians in a crosswalk, to persons using a seeing eye guide dog, to persons using a white cane with or without a red tip, at T intersections where you must yield to vehicles on the through road, at uncontrolled intersections where vehicles are already in the intersection, when driving on an unpaved road that intersects with a paved road, when returning to the roadway after a car is parked. Pedestrians must always be yielded the right of way at intersections and crosswalks. Treat bicycles as motor vehicles. Yield to bicyclists in all situations where you would yield to a car. For example, wait for an oncoming bicycle to pass before turning left. Turn right at a red light if it's permitted and no vehicles are approaching. If you see a sign that says "No right turn on red," then you must wait for the light to turn green again. Otherwise, you must turn right at a red light after yielding to oncoming traffic. Stop for pedestrians who've begun crossing the road. Once a pedestrian has begun crossing the road, they have the right of way. You should also stop for pedestrians waiting to cross at crosswalks that aren't controlled by a traffic light. Yield to oncoming traffic if you're entering a main road.
Hello and welcome to One on One. Today we'll be talking about investing, and my guest today was a media person before she became this financial coach, mogul, money talking woman. So her name is Shola Funmi Lawal. She describes herself as an investor 24/7. She's a media professional and has read over 350 books and thousands of articles on investing and companies. She has coached thousands to begin their investment journey and truly believes that everyone has the potential to be stupendously wealthy. That's speaking my language. When she's not investing, she works in one of the biggest tech companies in the world. Shola, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm
you
so happy that I was able to join you.
Yeah.
And thanks for reaching out. I'm always happy to talk to women who are doing amazing things, and I think you're doing amazing.
And you're a woman doing amazing things as well.
Thank you very much.
So my first question to you is, even though you still describe yourself as a media professional, so Shola, you're into the media, producing shows and everything, you know, and then you've just made the switch. So please tell me, how did that switch happen?
So my life has been a fun one of switches.
Okay.
Backstory, and I don't say this a lot to a lot of people, is that I actually studied nursing. I have 4 degrees in nursing.
Oh, wow.
That's what I studied in university. I spent 5-6 years studying all of this. And then I remember working in the hospital for about 3 months, and I was like, this is not what I'm going to do. Like, I just don't find this as stimulating as
possible. So how did you get to nursing in the first place?
So I studied nursing. My mom
Why
is
did
like,
you choose to do
you know,
nursing?
parents. My mom lives abroad. She's a nurse, and she's like, you
making
have to
money.
do nursing. You make money. People will like you. You're very nice. You'll be a good nurse. So anyway, I did that, and after working for about 3 to 6 months exactly,